Okay.
This is Sessions with Sara Cate and Ashley, a podcast that explores the feelings, emotions, and experiences of what it means to be human in this world. This podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant to replace therapeutic services of any kind. Please refer to the list of references if you need support.
And before you dive in, please like, subscribe, comment, share with anyone you think might also connect with today's session. Our goal is to reach as many people as possible, and we are endlessly grateful for your continued support. So let's get to it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Sessions episode of Sessions with Sara Cate and Ashley. Dang it. Every time I'm in charge of starting, I mess it up.
That was amazing. I love it. That's called authentic. We are nothing if not authentic.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, all right. An appropriate beginning to this episode because it's a little dicey. It's a little spicy. It is our follow-up. It is part two of Shame. Part 1 you can find in season 1. It was episode 4, I believe. 3. It was episode 3. And it's funny because we listened to that episode, and after like our intro episodes were like fun, hey, get to know us. That is the first topic that we decided to talk about was shame. And
Came in hot.
So here we are. We want to do a follow-up. We want to really kind of focus in on some of the things that we spoke about last time that we feel are really, really important, and give some insight, give some thoughts on how we as adults can move through feelings like this and how we go about actually finding whatever you want to say, some resilience in that shame cycle, some healing in that shame cycle, some acceptance, whatever is landing with you, we want to help you find some of that.
Yeah, I was listening. Not only did I listen to the episode again, which I was reflecting on how Ashley and I have not changed, which I actually love. We are the same as we were in episode 3. But I was listening to Dr. Gabor Mate and Dick Schwartz, who created parts work, essentially. If you've ever heard of parts or internal family structures, right? Internal family systems. Internal family systems. But they were having a conversation on breaking the circle of shame. And the one thing that what Ashley was just saying, and I was like, Ashley, I want to talk about this thing. And it was actually really in alignment with what they were talking about, which is compassion. Like, how do we care for, support, acknowledge, pay attention to the experience of shame? In part 1, we really talk about how it lives for us. Ashley and I kind of explored our own bodies and our own systems around where shame lived and how we took care of it. Ashley kind of talked about how she felt it in her diaphragm, and even bringing her own hand to her diaphragm kind of contained it when she would be feeling shame. And that gave her some safety in exploring it and feeling it. And so I think where we really want to take the conversation today is, and we were really trying to highlight, like, you will feel shame likely in your life. And so that's normalizing that, not trying to cut again another emotion off, really trying to give permission to be like, I hate feeling shame and I still feel it. And so that way, this time, I think we want to deepen into, like, how do we really care for ourselves in our own circles of shame and our own kind of patterns of it. Something I found really interesting that Gabor Mate said was that we can actually, as young as a 9-year-old or 9-month-old, you can shame them by breaking eye contact because they feel their caregiver leave. And then they do everything that they possibly can to get that attention. And if they don't get that eye connection, eye gaze back, they believe that they are responsible for the caregiver leaving.
Mm.
And I was like, God, 9 months
Mhm.
old, right? And I'm sure it's even before that, but
Mhm.
that was just his example. And I'm like, damn, we've been feeling
Mhm.
probably inadvertent shame-based feelings
Mhm.
our whole life.
Well, and I mean, like speaking to that 9-month-old, I mean, if you go back further to when you were developing in the womb that you came from, how that person and the people around that person are responding to things is the imprintation that you get. And so before you even are earthside, you are that's imprinted on you. And I think, I mean, just such, this is a point I think that like has to be understood, because it's like that, it's that significant that there is a reason why you feel the way you do. And that it starts so young and you couldn't do anything to control that.
It wasn't ours.
It was right. It literally wasn't your fault, and it just doesn't belong to you. And I think that
some might in adulthood.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. I'm
totally.
Yes.
But yes, I think it's very, what is it? Like compact, like it's compounded on itself.
Right. And then, like what we get to do now, and this is like what we talked about prior to starting this, is what we get to do now is decide that we as adults want to feel differently.
Yes.
And moving through that, feel differently in how we show up in relationship, feel differently about how we just feel in our body, feel differently about how we speak to ourselves, all aspects of life. We can decide that we want to do that. And this is, I think, where we want to take this conversation.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Well, I was if you're not watching,
were you asking
no,
me for that?
I needed a little I needed a little reassurance, but I also was thinking maybe just really quickly, just in case you haven't listened to that first episode, a reminder of shame and guilt, the difference. Ooh. Very simply, shame is I am bad, unworthy. Guilt is I did something, right? Like there was an act that I did, and that
I don't love.
Yeah, that comes from Brene Brown. That's her definition of that. So I just want to like make that clear, is like we're talking about the shame of that we have this belief that we are inherently bad or unworthy. And so that's what we're moving through with this.
Yeah.
That's all. That was this random thought came to my head.
It's not a random thought. It's on point.
Yeah.
It lands. It landed right here in this moment. But yes, because what is happening? I am so scatterbrained today. The truth is, yes, we have to kind of bring those threads back in from that last episode of like, you are going to feel shame. Shame is a part of being human, because even if we didn't do something to be shamed or to feel shame, we carry it in our body, in our DNA. I mean, it's also generational. We did a whole conversation about generational trauma, and shame falls into that category, right? Like if there is like a history of shame in your family, shamed out of, maybe it's religious trauma, like where you were a part of really high impact religious groups that used a lot of shame-based language. Maybe that was something your family historically experienced. And so there's always this, you're always in deficit. You're always trying to prove your value and your worth, because a lot of religions believe we were born sinners, right? And so if you were born into that doctrine or that kind of programming, that you are always trying to prove that you're good, that the underlying message of that is that you are not, that you are born bad. And so like that is a way to, and we kind of talked about it in that episode, that is a way to control people. That is a way to enforce beliefs on people when you imbue this sense of like badness and wrongness and dirtiness or sinfulness or whatever it is. It makes people, we then more easily are controlled, because if we don't believe that we are whole, worthy of value, we will make decisions based off of feeling unworthy. Ashley's laughing.
I am, because again, random, but
Point.
on point. I just, this is, okay. I mean, I can remember sitting in the pew of church after going to confession where I had to tell this man, and I went
Adult man.
adult man, all of the sins that I have done, and then he's gonna tell me how many prayers I got to say. And listen, I went face to face with this person every time, because I'm gonna look you in your eye. You know, you could go, because you could go through a screen.
I was gonna say, isn't there like a thing?
No,
I'm
you
not.
can
I was not
go.
raised Catholic.
You can go face to face.
Oh,
or there's a screen.
that's right, Ashley. You go toe to toe with
And
that
I
priest.
every
That's my
time,
girl.
every time I went face to face, because I was like, part of me was like, I'm
I
not
don't
buying
believe
this.
this. Yeah, I'm not
I ain't
buying
buying
your
it.
salad.
And I want to be able to see what you're doing. Like, I don't want to be behind this screen. Anyways, so then I remember going, and you know, then they tell you like, okay, you got to go say 7 Hail Marys, 5 Our Fathers, and 12 Glory Bees, you know, and then you go sit. I'm what, 12, 13, 14, going to sit in the pew and first of all, trying to count how many times I've said these prayers, and then sitting there being like, this is what I have to do to be good. Like,
Mhm.
this is how
the
I
rule book.
earn purity. This is how I earn my worthiness.
Yeah. Which, but even look at that, like, right, like that's a young brain trying to
Totally.
like
Trying to,
make
like,
sense of like
yeah,
this
of these
shame-based,
rules.
yeah, this
Yeah.
shame-based programming that says you have to do these things in order to be okay, to
Yeah.
be loved, to be safe, to be cared for.
Mhm.
And you know that, again, there's a lot of resources posted if you have some religious or spiritual trauma, or you know, and I want to be mindful of the people who still are really connected to their religions and their practices. I understand it.
Yeah.
We're just speaking about, if you break it down into kind of a theoretical like conversation, we really
Mhm.
are talking about the way in which people are programmed. Either at the beginning they are good or bad, and there's
Right.
no
Yes.
denying that.
Yeah.
Right, like some
Yeah.
people might say, yes, I was born a sinner, and I respect you for believing what you
Mhm.
believe. I sit back and have to unravel this with a lot of my clients, that they are born whole, and there
Mhm.
are some religions and practices out there that do preach that message,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
there can be redemption, there can be
Yeah.
healing, there can be a reclamation of what it means for you to believe your faith and hold your faith.
Totally.
But I think acknowledging, like we talked about in the last episode, or in the last part 1 about shame, that acknowledging that you're going to feel it, right? Like, let's not
Mhm.
pretend that it isn't shame. Let's not
Right.
pretend that it isn't this story that I am unworthy, or I don't have value, or I am bad, you know, and until we reconcile that as a truth, um, it can be really hard to change it.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I was talking to Ashley. Um, I've had this very, very difficult relationship to sleep the entirety of my life. I don't know about my baby years. I'm assuming so, because I know that I had disruptive sleep with my mom. But as a young kid, like my earliest childhood memories of our being in absolute terror in my bed at 4 years old, um, panicked because I couldn't sleep. And I was so scared that something was going to happen. And that has carried with me through my life into my adult years. And I have learned how to shame myself for it early on, because nothing was happening, nothing bad, quote unquote, had happened. In my conscious memory, it was just very disruptive to everybody. And I learned to hide it, shut it down, which then brought up a deep sense of shame in my own system, because I was like, this part of me is bad. Like, this is a thing that is bad because I don't have good sleep hygiene, or I have these irrational fears, right? Which makes us feel crazy. And then I'm kind of like, okay, well, then this is stupid. Like, I mean, all of these things have gone through my self dialogue. And I was saying to Ashley, and I've been working on it in therapy and acupuncture. I've been working with different healers. to move this through. I've tried all of the different supplements and the sleep aids and all of those things, and nothing really touches it. It was getting a little better, and then I've had a regression. And I was saying to Ashley, like, I'm learning for the first time in my life to share it with people that love me. And that is because I have changed my relationship to the shame of it, in the sense that, like, I'm no longer going to tell myself that it isn't true. And that is an act of compassion by saying, Sara, you are scared in the middle of the night. And I'm going to use that word quite simply. I get so scared in the middle of the night. I wake up in panic, essentially. And it takes me a while to calm myself down and realize I'm safe. And even that sometimes is hard to navigate and do. And this is why I do what I do, because I believe so deeply in anxiety and panic. Like, you can't talk yourself out of it in the middle of it. But we use shame to try to talk people out of what they're feeling, what they're thinking. Right. And I've just decided and it's still an active daily decision. And some days I do shame myself and I'm like, God, this is stupid. Like, I just need to get over it. And then there are days that I find compassion with the people that love me. You know, Ashley's been supportive of me in this. My partner, my dearest friend who I live with, I've had people share that they want to figure out how to support me with this thing that I deal with. And to even bring it into the light has given it permission to not feel so alone in it, which then again changes the dynamic that I have to it, that I don't have to shame this part of me that's really scared.
Yeah.
I don't have to treat it so poorly. And however it was treated in the past by myself, by caregivers, whatever it was, who we were all doing the best we could with what we had. You know, I don't think any of us understood it. That now as this adult, I get to take responsibility for it and create care for it in a way that I don't think I've ever, it's just an approach I've never taken.
Yeah.
Was to actually take care of this thing. And that is what moves it. You know, shame likes to keep things in the dark.
Yeah.
It likes to hide them.
Yeah.
Because then it can stay. Because if I shamed it, then I would never do anything to really take care of it. But me bringing it out in the light and saying, hey, I struggle with this thing quite acutely and quite consistently. And people saying, I see you. I love you. I hear you. You're not crazy. Yeah, it's been really great.
So I just wanna, thank you for sharing. That was very brave. And you did a great job.
Things I can't, my breath is not going below my diaphragm right now.
She needs to take a few deep breaths. But what you spoke to is this thing that either we pick up somewhere along our life. Oftentimes we pick up along our life that we celebrate in community and suffer in silence. And what that does is it removes us from the power that is so present when we are with people who really love us. Because the thing that Sara Cate didn't do is she didn't share these things with people who didn't love her. And we don't have to share things with people who aren't going to support us, regardless of what their relationship is to us. We don't have to share everything with everyone just because they're our family, just because whatever it is, right? We get to, as an adult, choose who sees that part of our heart. And what she spoke to is she mentioned, like being born whole, and how sometimes we lose that along the way, or we take on beliefs that don't support that. But what she's speaking to is like the recognition that she is whole, because being whole includes all of you, right? It includes these parts that aren't any less lovable. they're just really hard to talk about sometimes. They're just really hard to acknowledge, and the power that they hold is held because it's kept in the dark. The silence around it all is what just, like, is what
Mhm.
feeds it.
Mhm.
And when
Keeps it
we
there.
yeah, when we the greatest act of our life is gonna be to show ourselves compassion.
Woof.
I
So hard.
I
I mean, truly,
Yeah,
like, the most
yeah,
heroic.
yeah,
These
yeah,
these, like, scared parts of these scared, dirty, angry, quote, unquote, "unlovable" parts of ourselves
yeah,
deserve compassion also.
yeah. And
So hard.
it's so hard, right? But she described her path to coming to this point where she decided to, like, let a little bit of light in, right? She's, again, we don't have to bare our soul to everybody we meet, but there are people who, when we need a little bit of light shined on those areas, they make it shine brighter,
Mhm.
right? They help us see ourselves through the lens of who we're telling. And that healing next to another human is there's there's just nothing else that can compare to that.
Mm.
And we are here not to suffer alone. We're here to heal in community. We're here to heal. We're here to live a life that we love.
Mhm.
We're here because we are whole and worthy. It is our birthright. And community is one of those things that supports us in that.
Yeah. Well, and I think even it's why we find ourselves in so many different communities, like be it
Mhm.
professional, be it religious, be it a social club, be it, whatever it is, we are always out there looking for reflections, right? Of
Mhm.
like, we're trying to create what we call in somatic experiencing, like coherence, trying
Mhm.
to create more coherence in our body. And so it's like, if I feel this thing in my body and you reflect to me that, like, yeah, that's a feeling based off of whatever's happening, that makes sense. It's all of a sudden like, oh my God, my external world and my internal world are congruent.
Mhm.
And that brings such a degree of coherence. And that's what our caregivers are really meant to do for us early on. Like when we're really upset, they can say, yeah, I see you're angry. And then our body's like, oh, this is anger. So we learn to
Mhm.
trust
Mhm.
anger. But when that hasn't happened, when a caregiver's been like, that's not an appropriate response, or stop it, or change it, or we've
Mhm.
talked about that, I'll give you something to cry about, right? And yet we're feeling disrupted inside, and then the attunement to us is no, that's not right, or shut it down. Then we stop trusting ourselves.
Mhm.
So then we stop feeling our emotions. And I think that, what Ash is talking about in healing and community or through practitioners or just the love of people
Right.
who care for us
Yeah,
is
community is
critical.
it could be a group of people, but, like, when I say community, it's like one person,
It
right?
can
And so,
be
like,
Ashley to me.
yeah, right,
Mhm.
it could be your therapist, it could be your mom, it could be whoever is truly someone where you don't just logically know that you're safe with
Mhm.
them, you feel the safety in your body.
Mhm.
Um, so can I ask you a question?
Always. Lay it
I'm
on me.
springing it on her. Springing it on her. She does this to me
I
sometimes.
do. I'm taking my own medicine, if you will.
No, okay. So you spoke though about how, it was in the silence, it was in the darkness, however you want to, and then you have come to this
Mhm. Place.
decision, right? And so when you come to that decision, is it that you just all of a sudden are like, I'm good, I want people to hear about this?
No.
Okay, so tell me more about it. Tell me
Yeah.
more. Because
Yeah.
how does somebody say, okay, I want to feel differently.
Yeah.
I know that I want to feel differently,
Yeah.
and have action
Mm.
when you still feel shitty.
I mean, ultimately, I think it's a process because I think that I have known
Mm-hmm.
as I've continued to age, which doesn't stop happening.
Turns out.
Keeps happening. So as I've aged and like sleep has become, in my 20s, I could run on fumes.
Yeah.
And then in my 30s, I could still kind of do it. And now in my late 30s, entering my 40s, I'm like, ouch, everything hurts all of the time. And I still want to be in my life. I want to be present for the relationships in my life. I want to be a really good therapist, the best therapist I can be. And that requires presence. I want to do this podcast with intention and love, and that requires presence and energy. And when I am exhausted, I am not present.
Yeah.
And I find myself not wanting to do things that I want to do because I'm so tired. And, and I want to be clear, like, I know that what I'm speaking about comes with a degree of privilege, that like being tired or lack of sleep, is relative to my privilege and my lived experience, that is my greatest concern. And that is my greatest fear. So I do want to acknowledge, like, whatever you might be journeying with might be a degree more difficult, or 10 degrees more difficult, or something completely different. But just even the fact that we acknowledge the subjective quality of what ails us, or like the difference in what our demons might be, depends on our lived experience. So I do want to name that, because I know it's what might be significant for me might not be significant for somebody else.
Well, and that's one of the things though that we also have to like nudge here, is that we're not in a position to judge anybody else's quote struggles, right? So we're not comparing
or qualifying one greater,
right? It is, things are very true for me. Things are very true for Sara Cate. They're probably going to be different. We can have similar experiences, but still our experience with that similar thing is going to be very different. And so this is a big deal.
Totally.
Like it's just whatever is true for us.
Right.
And so you don't have to, if you feel like somebody else is going to say that's really like,
yes,
that's so small, don't worry about it.
And that's
not the case.
Yeah. I wanted to highlight that because this is where shame can shame us away from being like, I mean, because I even still have clients who have lived an incredible trauma and will tell me something that they're struggling with that is seemingly disconnected from their trauma. And I'm like, and they're embarrassed that this teeny tiny thing is bothering them. I know. And I'm like, whoa, this, first of all, it's all interrelated, because trauma reduces our capacity to take care of things that are seemingly simple. So like, it's all interconnected once we experience something in our body. And so to not shame whatever yours might be, or to not hold back and be honest about what you're struggling with, because you were afraid that it isn't as big, or it isn't as hard. Or conversely, to not make room for people, right, who have those big things and those hard things, and not acknowledge those too, right? Like everybody has their thing, right? And again, this is where it comes back to our own individual body and our own individual system and how we care for it. And then to follow it up, that was a little caveat, but we had to go there. And to your question, I think it's been years of me getting to this age where I am looking back going, okay, I could manage it, but I've done enough work, I'm paying attention enough, I think, to what I feel in my body finally, that I don't want to feel that way. And it doesn't mean that I don't still fall into old patterns with it. Shut it down, shame it. I go back to the shame. And again, I'm going to feel the shame of it. And I do know that, like, I want the next 40 to feel different in a lot of ways. And this is one of them. What we know about sleep is critical to brain function and brain health and body health and restoration. And so those are things that, like, I'm starting to prioritize. And those I would not prioritize them if I had not, and will continue to do the work to believe that I am worthy
Mm.
of that care
Mhm.
and of that time and of that,
Mhm.
direction. And it's taken every session with my therapist and every acupuncture session and every conversation I've ever had about it.
Mhm.
Or I can remember joking about it. Like for a long time, it was like in my 20s, especially, I would just make jokes about my night terrors and like,
Oof.
like to just explain
Yeah.
it away
Mhm.
essentially and like make it
Humor is a really good way to
silly.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I'm kind of like, oh my God, my poor body. Like
Mhm.
to feel that degree of like fear,
Yeah.
like I just want to take care of it. And it
Mhm.
isn't, I sit with this every day, not only with myself, but with my clients of just like permission and invitation to consistently allow what we feel to
Mhm.
be real.
Mhm.
And just because someone else might not see it as real or someone else might not be able to validate it, it doesn't mean that what is happening in your body is any less true.
Right. And it is never too late or too soon to start.
Woo!
And
Try it.
I say that with so much conviction
Mhm.
because when I am working with someone who literally one of my clients just said this to me the other day. She said, I'm 70 and I just don't see the point of caring for myself now because I've lived my whole life like this. And that's something very real that she's
Sure.
feeling. That is a very real present fight, right? That she is in. And again, the purpose of being here is to fully fulfill your birthright
Mhm.
of wholeness.
Mhm.
And so it's not too late because if you're 70 and your best days are before you, aren't you going to be so glad
Mhm.
that you
They
got to
feel different.
experience that they feel different? It's never, you're ready right now. If you wait till you're quote ready to like do the work.
Mhm.
And when we say the work, we've spoken so often about this. And what Sara Cate just said is she's just like to be constantly giving yourself permission to feel what you feel or to acknowledge what you feel. Um, that's where you start. It doesn't have to be some big pay $1 million to go see the specialist or whatever, right? It is the daily conversation that you have with yourself about accepting or just even asking, what am I feeling?
Mhm.
And then the next moment, what am I feeling? Right? Some days you're going to ask yourself 17 times and you'll feel really good about that. And some days the best you can do is just get dressed and show up to work. And that's okay. That's part of when we talk about the work, it's not this big act of
Mm-mm.
like
Going to spend hundreds of dollars, like she said,
right, like that's
on different
not
practices.
yeah, that's not there are practices that are helpful. There are people who can help you through this, right? But doing being present with yourself in a way that allows you to start to get used to hearing what your body is saying, that's
Mhm.
the work.
Mhm.
And that doesn't, that's just an everyday.
Practice. Well, it's an
Yeah.
everyday relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
Um, I don't for those of you not watching, I have my hand on my body and I just want to bring note to this because this is a way that again, I'm never sharing this brings up a lot for me because it feels vulnerable, it feels exposing. And there's some like interesting guilt/shame that comes up in even sharing it. And so I'm creating a containment for myself. And this is a practice that you can do when you feel weathered or exposed, or sometimes, like even if you feel like paper thin, right? Like
Mhm.
if you just feel like you don't have a fullness to you after a depleted day or whatever it might be. Like self-contact or self-containment can be done a number of ways, but I just wanted to acknowledge that as a soothing mechanism for kind of that like activation that comes after something really intense.
Yeah.
Is that we can come into self-contact and our nervous system recognizes that as connection. And we need connection. If we're feeling activated or we're feeling triggered or we're feeling, discomfort, a way to really soothe is to come into that self-contact or contact with another. Ashley reached over and grabbed, my leg and just gave me a little squeeze when I got done speaking because it was intense and it's for me, right? This is just for me. And being able to again find ways to be with the shame, our wholeness isn't me feeling good 100% of the time. Our wholeness is me feeling shame and then coming in and caring for myself, having compassion for myself when I do. Which Ashley kind of started this whole thing off with, of like, how do we acknowledge and recognize care and safety and support from community, from ourselves when we feel compromised or unsupported.
Yeah. So
thanks
Sara
for being
Cate.
here.
Sara Cate, thank you for being you.
Thank you for being you
and,
and holding the container
and sharing and providing us with everything that you bring. She is a gem, folks.
Okay.
She is a real.
All right, let's not send me to the moon right now.
No, I'll send you to the moon. No, but no, like in all honesty, it's not easy. And these conversations are important to have. And I'm so grateful that we can be here to be I mean, I couldn't even start the episode, right? For God's sakes. I have like 5 words to say and I can't. It's never right.
That's not true.
Well, I mean, it's fine, but here we are, right? Like we've said this many times, but we're here,
yes,
to have conversations that aren't typically had, and to invite you to maybe see that there is an opportunity for conversations like this. And so by Sara Cate sharing this, we got to see a real live example of what that looks like, and the triumph in it, and the struggle in it, and the vulnerability in it, and the sacredness in it. And so I think that that's where we'll leave you.
Yeah.
And
support and care for those of you who have your own things that are living in there that have hidden themselves and keep themselves shamed and tucked away.
Yeah. Resources are listed.
Yes.
Share with anybody who you think might benefit. And until next time, take care. Bye.